Justice Hunters is here. Let's talk about Draco Tail. Hey guys, Otaker back with another video, and today we're going to be doing the Draco Tail Introductory Guide. With Justice Hunters finally here, it is finally time to be seeing the reign of the 3 new decks in the set, which is Draco Tail, Yummy, and Canine. And I think now is the appropriate time to be introducing you all to these archetypes. So today we're going to be talking about Draco Tail. So just a quick reminder, this is an introductory guide. It is not an in-depth guide. So I'm not going to be sitting here teaching you every tiny little tech for the deck. I'm not going to be showing you the most optimal build to be played. I'm not going to be telling you how to play around every hand trap known to man, because it is not that kind of video. What I am going to be doing, however, is showing you each individual card in the archetype, letting you know what they can do, how viable they are. I will be showing you a build. It will not be the most optimal build. I'll be mentioning what other decks this could also be mixed into, so that way it can be a more competent strategy. And then I will be showing you the most basic line combo, only one combo, not a massive amount. We will also be going over like the pros and cons of the deck at face value. Obviously, there is more in-depth stuff, but we will learn more of that as like the format evolves. But if you are looking for a more in-depth guide, let me know in the comment section below, and I will provide one later on down the road. Let's talk pros and cons of the deck, and let's start with pros. And for a little bit of context, this is a fusion-focused deck, and the first pro is that it has a lot of ways to fuse on your opponent's turn. A lot of the monsters have in-hand effect that, when activated, you can fusion summon as a quick effect using monsters on your field in your hand. So there is a lot of like flexibility, but then on top of that, they all have effects that when they are used as fusion material and they hit the graveyard, kind of like Chimera, they gain effects to either set spells and traps from the deck or to add monsters from the graveyard back to the hand, so you constantly have resources. Secondly, just like Yummy, the deck has multiple ways of getting back its resources from like the graveyard or banish pile, so that way you never truly lose your resources. However, unlike Yummy, the way of doing that is a little less recursive. You really get diminished returns each time you do it, so it's less likely that you want to be caught in a massive grind game. But at the current moment, I think a big con to the deck is how heavy it relies on it needs monsters in hand to be used as fusion material. And because of that, if you just don't have like the resources in hand to really keep up with that, it can result in just like not having really anything to do. Like, you really never want to end with no cards in your hand on your, for your opponent's turn. But on top of that, the deck does have one of the spells that can use a monster from deck, so you're never really losing like a massive amount of resources. But the Draco Tail fusion monsters do require monsters in hand to be summoned, and their effects actually heavily rely on how many in hand you use to kind of decide how effective their effects are. And then like another big con, I think, to the deck right now is, unlike decks like Yummy and Canine, where we already kind of know where they're going into the next format, Canine obviously is going to be primarily in Vanquish Soul, but also like an engine and a bunch of other decks, and Yummy is predominantly going to be like by itself with like maybe some other builds getting ran just to like kind of test and see where the waters are. But Draco Tail, we're a little in the dark on. So in the OCG, Draco Tail's most popular build right now is either the Magistus cards or Canine. Canine is whatever, but we unfortunately can't really play the Magistus cards to full capacity, because in Monster Mayhem, when we got all of the other Magistus support cards, we did not get Spoon. Now, Spoon is by no means required, but it is heavily influenced on how good the deck is with the Magistus cards, and because of that, I do think that Magistus will not see play in this deck until the eventual day that we get Spoon. However, let's go ahead and talk about the cards, shall we? So we have Draco Tail Pan, so the simulator I'm using hasn't gone to the TCG association yet, and we are not getting Dragon Tail because of copyright reasons with a children's show. But it is a level 7 wind dragon monster. If this card is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set 1 Draco Tail spell or trap from your deck, then you can destroy 1 monster on the field. If a face-up fusion monster you control is destroyed by an opponent's card effect while this card is in your graveyard, except during the damage step, you can place this card on the bottom of the deck, and if you do, special summon 1 non-fusion Draco Tail monster from your graveyard. Then we have Draco Tail Urgula. It is a level 6 fire dragon monster. If this card is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set 1 Draco Tail spell or trap from the deck, then you can destroy 1 spell or trap on the field. If this card is in your graveyard, you can target 1 spellcaster Draco Tail monster in your graveyard, place this card on the bottom of the deck, and if you do, add that monster to your hand. So immediately, so these two are kind of like yin and yang, they go together. Pan obviously is setting a spell or trap and destroying a monster on the field, whereas Urgula is setting a spell or trap and destroying a spell or trap on the field. So the reason I think like Draco Tail will still be good, even as like a pure version, is simply because the deck has ways to crack boards. And this is what we see a lot with like fusion decks, is the monsters that get used as fusion material, they replace themselves because fusion decks are so heavily resource dependent. But on top of that, they lean a lot towards board breaker style, because since you're so heavily influenced on how many resources you have, you do obviously want to have less like hand traps. Now, the deck only requires monsters in hand, which means that your dead hand traps do have utility in this deck. So I do think this will be leaning more towards a hand trap style deck, and that's good because we do need fusion decks that lean more towards that. Decks like Chimera or Branded, they lean a lot more towards the board breaker style because, you know, cards like Ash Blossom and Ghost Belle don't really do anything for the deck aside from get hand trapped, but then you have one less card in hand for resources. Then we have Draco Tail Femena. This is your starter of the deck, and we'll get into that when we get into the combo, but it is a level 5, sound familiar, level 5 water spellcaster. During the main phase, quick effect, you can discard this card, fusion summon one dragon or spellcaster fusion monster from your X deck using monsters from your hand or field. If this card is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set one Draco Tail spell or trap from your deck. You can only use each effect of Dragon Tail Femena once per turn. So my only like real beef with this card is you discard it to activate its effect, and it is a quick effect, so that means that you can activate this on your opponent's turn, but it is not part of the fusion summon, so you're kind of going -3 essentially for one fusion guy. Now don't get me wrong, the guy you're summoning to make this is going to be able to like get this back to hand, and then you can later you know fuse it away to set a Draco Tail spell or trap, but it's like really like like realistically, if your opponent has like Dominus Impulse in hand and they hit Femena, like you're hurting. I'm not gonna lie, you're really hurting because you discard this card. Now that being said, aside from like decks like Orcus and Mixerugi, I don't know how common a deck that can run Impulse is going to be going into the next format. And if you haven't noticed, these are all different attributes, so we will not be playing any of the Dominus cards in this deck. We then have Draco Tail Lucius. This is going to be like your normal summon. This is going to be the main starter of the deck, which is a level 4 Earth spellcaster. If this card is normal special summon, you can add one Draco Tail monster from deck to hand, except Draco Tail Lucius. If this card is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set one Draco Tail spell trap from your deck. You can only use each effect of Lucius once per turn. So you're kind of getting the theme. When they're all used as material to make a fusion monster, they set a Draco Tail spell or trap. Now, these two get bonus effects because you know they're bigger, they're cooler, but these two, and I believe even Mueller is going to also kind of do the same, but they don't get bonus effects on top of that, but that's okay. The last monster is Draco Tail Mueller. It is a level 3 Dark Dragon. During the main phase, quick effect, you can fusion summon one Draco Tail fusion monster from your X deck using monsters from your hand or field. Also, you cannot special summon from your X deck for the rest of this turn except fusion monsters. And then if this card is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set one Draco Tail spell trap from your deck. Then you can negate the effects of one face-up monster your opponent controls. You can only use each effect of Merle once per turn. So again, this one also gets a bonus effect because it's like a bigger little dragon guy, even though he's kind of like the tiny baby of the bunch. But this one is a quick effect, but it does require him being on field to do it. You cannot activate this in hand, whereas Femena, you can activate it in hand. So you have the ability to quick effect fuse with a monster in hand, but then you have the same effect on the field. But they all get similar effects where they can set a spell or trap from the deck, whereas 3 of the guys get bonus effects on top of that. We do have 2 spell cards. We have Key 2 Draco Tail. It is a normal spell. You can add one Draco Tail monster from deck to hand. Then, if your opponent controls a monster, you can fusion summon one dragon or spellcaster monster from your X deck using monsters from your hand or field. So it's a normal spell that can just add, and then if you're going second on resolution, it fusion summons on top of that, which is pretty powerful. It's like a Rhoda that with, you know, extra steps. But since it is a normal spell and the next spell is also a normal spell, you can set these off of like the monster effects when they're used as fusion material and then immediately activate them because they are normal spells. They're not quick plays or traps or whatever. We then have Rahu Draco Tail. Fusion summon one Draco Tail fusion monster from your X deck using monsters from your hand, deck, and or field. Also, you cannot special summon from the X deck for the rest of this turn after this card resolves, except fusion monsters. So it says deck. Now keep in mind, the Draco Tail fusion monsters do require at least one monster in hand, which means you always have to have that one monster in hand, but the other monster you use as material can be from the deck. So this is like the best one in my opinion. It's like a pseudo branded fusion or like a pseudo Shadal fusion. It can fuse from the deck. So this is like the best one in my opinion. We then have Draco Tail Flame as our first trap card. You can target one face-up spell on the field, negate its effects until the end of this turn. Then you can place one Dragon Tail card from your graveyard or banishment on the bottom of the deck except Draco Tail Flame and draw one card. So this is how you're getting your resources back, is that it can take from the banish pile, which will happen because we do have Light and Darks in the deck as well, which means Bestials are a problem. Crow is running around. So this is how you can get like your banished resources back. So you have the ability to recur your resources, but then it draws a card on top of that. And the last main deck card is Draco Tail Horn. You can target one attack position monster on the field, return it to the hand/X deck. Then you can place one Draco Tail card from graveyard or banishment on the bottom of the deck except Draco Tail Horn and draw one card. So the draw card is given to both trap cards, but it does say attack position monster, which means if they like special monster in defense mode, he's sticking around. Keep in mind here, though, there is no trap negate and technically no monster negate. You are only getting to negate a spell card, which is fine because that's like predominantly Yu-Gi-Oh these days. All right, so we've been talking about all this fusion summoning. Let's talk about the two available fusion monsters in the archetype. So we have Draco Tail Altharian. It is a level 8 Earth Dragon fusion monster. It requires one Draco Tail monster and one monster in the hand. If this card is fusion summoned, you can target monsters on the field and or in any graveyard up to the number of monsters used as material from the hand. Return them to the hand. If two or more monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same time while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. So what it means by that is basically, if a monster is synchro summoned, if a monster is fusion summoned using monsters to send them all to the graveyard, you can bring this guy back. However, what the stipulation here is that it doesn't say if you send two monsters to the graveyard at the same time. It just says if two or more monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same time. Meaning if like your opponent's playing, I don't know, Yummy, Altharian can come back. Now, keep in mind, he doesn't really do anything when he comes back. He just shows up. Meaning that, like, he's just a body, which is fine, because we can use him as a body, like fusion summon into, like, Guardian Chimera, or plenty of other cards, but he's not really doing much other than that. Now, the perk here is that when he is banished, because it says banished when it leaves the field, the trap card can put him back, so you never truly lose him. And then our last fusion monster is Draco Tail Grammel. It is a level 7 water spellcaster fusion monster. And then just like the last guy, it does require one Draco Tail monster and one monster in hand. When you activate a Draco Tail card or effect, quick effect, you can target one card your opponent controls, destroy it. If two or more monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same time while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. So the second effect is the exact same as Altharian. They're just bodies when they come back, or if it's on your turn and you like fusion summon, you can bring them back, and then like you can go for like OTK potential. And then again, when they're banished, you know, the trap cards can get them back. All right, so let's take a look at a build real quick, and we're gonna of course talk about like options for other subsidiary engines that could be played based on, you know, what's being played in the OCG, because we don't really have like Magista's Spoon available to us. But as I mentioned before, this is obviously not the most optimal build. I just went with like a realistic like hand trap-esque build with like a little extra perks to it. This will probably be played with a subsidiary engine of some kind. That being said, this is a pure version of the deck that did top at an OCG event recently, so we'll just have to run with it. Obviously, no max C. We're not going to really talk about the hand traps because we don't really care. We're just going to talk about like the ratios of the main deck monsters and then one outlier that I'm sure you've already seen. But we are playing 1 of Pan and 3 of Urgula, mainly just because like Urgula does get the ability to just pop spells and traps, which is very popular going into the next format because Vanquish Soul has that field spell that's going to prevent their monster from being destroyed by battle or card effect, and then Yummy has their field spells, and then both decks have like trap cards you really want to get off the field. So Urgula is more popular, whereas Pan is just popping a monster, which not a lot matters going into the next format because Yummy and Vanquish Soul can both dodge, and also Vanquish Soul can just straight protect with their field spell. So Pan's a little less popular. The meta you want 3 of because again it is your hand trap that you can activate on your opponent's turn to be able to fusion summon. The Lucius is your starter, so you obviously want to have 3 of this. Mueller is, again, another monster you want to constantly have, but also it is a monster negate on top of that, so it is still pretty valuable to have when used as a fusion material, so you always want to have this. 3 of each spell, because obviously the most opportunity you can have to fusion summon is obviously preferred, but on top of that, the Kitu is a Rhoda, essentially, and then 1 of each trap card, because you don't want to overload on trap cards. As for like the extra deck, we're seeing 3 of Altharian and 2 of Grammel. Just Altharian's like the best one. He's your most interaction on your opponent's turn, whereas like Grammel is like not doing much. It's like used for your opponent's turn, because when you activate a Draco Tail card, you can obviously pop a card in the field, so that way you have like interaction, but after that it's kind of dead. We're seeing people playing obviously Mysterion, because it just requires a Spellcaster and Dragon, something that is littering this deck, obviously. Secretarion Dragon, which again, another dragon and a Spellcaster, so you know, that's just everywhere. The side deck for the topping list was playing like Super Poly, and I do think like this deck is one of those decks that will be playing Super Poly. Super Poly is really good going into the next format, so we could definitely see Draco Tail be playing that. And then I don't really want to talk about the rest of the extra deck, because a lot of this is hypothetical based on what you're playing. As for subsidiary engines going into this format, again, we don't really have Magistus, but you can still play Magistus. Spoon is so important for that part of the deck that I don't foresee people playing the new cards or Magistus in general with Draco Tail, but the option is still there. I'm seeing a lot of people talk about Brandon, and that's why you see Cartesia here. Cartesia is also just like a guy you can put on the board. It is a spellcaster, and it is a quick effect fusion summon that doesn't require itself, and it's a quick effect generic fusion summon, which means that you can still just kind of end on it, and then you have interactive ability on your opponent's turn. But some people are fleshing it out more, and they're just going straight branded. This is something I could definitely see happening, because branded is just one of those decks that's kind of been in rogue tier status for a long time now, and is still a viable deck because it just does cold fusion, and Draco Tail, I think, will just further add to that. Fiendsmith is Fiendsmith. You just get 2 bodies on the board and you make a guy, and sure enough, this is one of those scenarios where I think he's just gonna, you know, Engraver's gonna run amok again. But K9 is the second most popular engine in the deck, other than the Magistus. But again, we don't have Magistus, so in my own personal opinion, I think the most likely builds to be ran with Draco Tail, if not playing Pure, which is still a good option, is going to either be K9 or Branded. Now, I did forget to mention this when I was going over the pros and cons. This deck is incredibly weak to K9 exactly. So K9, for those who don't know, and we'll get into this when we do the introductory guide for K9 later this week, K9 heavily revolves around using their effects to interact with your opponent, activating monster effects from hand or graveyard. So sure enough, if your opponent's activating hand traps, then you have extra bonus effects on most of your monsters, or you gain effects to be able to do so. And sure enough, you know, when your opponent is playing the game and you activate Fumena and they have fucking Ripper on the field, it's not a good time. And it's because of this that I think the Justice Hunters, like, as a set, is kind of like a triangle. So Yummy is really good against K9 because Yummy doesn't activate their effects in hand. K9 is really good against Draco Tail because Draco Tail activates effects in hand. And Draco Tail is kind of pretty good against Yummy because if you can prevent Yummy from establishing a board, as we mentioned in the last introductory guide, then Yummy struggles to play, and Draco Tail can definitely keep them off of bodies. So yeah, the biggest con here is that this deck's going to kind of struggle going into the best deck in the format, and unfortunately the deck can't really play the Dominus cards, which is the biggest counter to the K9 deck, because this deck has every attribute under the sun. All right, so for the combo, obviously it's a fusion deck, and like we talked about with the Chimera in-depth guide, fusion decks, we have to kind of, there's no real one-card combo because it's so heavily reliant on what else is in your hand. That being said, Lucius is our, like, one-card combo as long as you have another monster in hand. So we're going to start the turn off with Lucius and Pan, because Pan is, like, the least effective one between him and Argula. But we're going to go ahead and start the turn by normal summoning the Lucius effect to add the Fumena. We are then going to activate the Femena effect, discard herself to use Pan and Lucius to summon out the Altharian. So Altharian, because we used a monster from hand, we are able to bounce a monster from either graveyard or field back to the hand. So we're going to activate Altharian effect as chain 1, chain 2 Pan to set a spell or trap from the deck, and then chain 3 the Lucius to set another spell or trap from the hand. So with Pan and Lucius, we're going to set both normal spells to start. We don't need the traps until the end of our turn, and we are going to definitely be getting those by the end of the turn. And then the Draco Tail Altharian is going to be adding back the Femena, so that way we can later in this turn use its effect when it's fusion summoned to set one of the traps, but also we could just end on it. That's also an option. Then between the two spells, we're going to activate Key 2 first. Since our opponent doesn't control a monster, we will not get the fusion effect, so we're just going to get the Rhoda effect here, which is also fine. We're going to add the Mueller. Then we're going to activate Rahu to use Femena and Urgula to summon out the Grammel. We will activate the Femena effect and the Urgula effect to set both of the trap cards. We then activated the Urgula effect in graveyard to put himself on the bottom of the deck to put the Femena back in our hands. And again, we really want to be ending on Femena because Femena is our quick effect to fuse on our opponent's turn by using her in hand. Obviously, it'd be most ideal to end on Mueller, but in this exact example, we're not going to. But I'm sure later down the road, people will find ways to incorporate that. But even so, having Mueller in our hand as a fusion material means that we will be able to negate a monster on our opponent's board, which is also beneficial. And that's really it for today's introductory guide to Draco Tail. Let me know what you all think down in the comment section below. Is this the deck of the Justice Hunters format that you are going to be choosing? And let me know if this introductory guide kind of helped you establish a foundation on how to play the deck. Obviously, this is not an in-depth guide, so if that's something you are interested in seeing to get more details on how to dodge hand traps, how to further learn other lines, let me know in the comment section below. But also, don't forget to leave a like on this video, and if you're not already, consider subscribing to the channel for more content. But with that, I'll see you all in the next one. See ya!